I gotta say, Chuck Norris looks weird without facial hair. Not as weird as Tom Selleck without his mustache, but still pretty weird. Hi everyone, welcome back to my series called Decades of Action Challenge. This is where I take each one of Dom Breihan's picks for most important action movie of each year, beginning with Bullitt in 1968, moving forward to the present year, or perhaps just the previous year. Watching each of them in turn and making a video about them. I am right now doing 1972, and Breihan's choice was a film directed by and starring Bruce Lee called The Way of the Dragon, or the version that I saw, which I have right here, Return of the Dragon. Same movie, different title, and I'm not sure whether or not Return of the Dragon is simply the English dub of the movie, and Way of the Dragon is a version in Chinese with English subtitles, but yeah, same movie. So this is the version that I watched, Return of the Dragon. But it and The Way of the Dragon are the same thing. If you'd like to read Breihan's article, it is in the link below. You can take a look at that, as well as the other articles that he's written so far. He writes one every 2 weeks, or posts one every 2 weeks. So by the time we get to the end of the year in December, I will have caught up with him because I'm doing one video per week. Speaking of the articles, a little bit of bad news, unfortunately. Breihan posted his most recent article on avclub.com this morning on Speed from 1994, which I'm very pleased about. I get to rewatch that in about 6 months' time or so, when I get to 1994. But he also included a little stinger, as he usually does, as to the next movie that he's going to be writing about from 1995. And I was hoping that it would be Michael Mann's film Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, but unfortunately Breihan didn't pick that one. Instead he picked Michael Bay's directorial debut, Bad Boys, with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, which is too bad, really. I was hoping that it wouldn't be Bad Boys. I considered the possibility that it might be Bad Boys, because it's Michael Bay, and it's his first movie. I was really hoping it would be Heat, because Heat, for me, is the movie that made holding the assault rifle properly look cool. You know, there have been a lot of 80s action movies and films where the heroes and bad guys basically would hold assault rifles improperly. They'd fire one-handed. They wouldn't put the stock into their shoulder so they could aim properly, things like that. You know, they'd fire two at once. All kinds of ridiculous things. And Heat made holding the assault rifle and firing the proper way look badass, and we've seen a lot more of that in the years since then, in movies like SWAT, for example. And I was really hoping that that and the simple fact that one of the bank robbery scene from Heat was one of the great action set pieces of the 90s, he would consider that to be a qualification for action movie of that particular year of 1995. But no, he picked Bad Boys instead, which is a shame, because I figured he would probably go with The Rock for the next year, because not only is that movie, that was just a huge hit, but it was also Michael Bay's most well-liked film, I think, in his whole filmography. Yeah, so I missed that one, unfortunately. I had two correct guesses in a row from 93 and 94, but I missed out on this one. So, yeah, once again, my average is not as good as it could be. Anyway, let's get to Bruce Lee's film. I actually reviewed Enter the Dragon a few years ago for my 1973 series, and since that is Breihan's pick for 73, I'll be rewatching that one and doing another video on that. The Way of the Dragon basically is a movie where you have a guy from Hong Kong who lives basically on a farm. I think he lives out in the country in Hong Kong. He's asked to fly to Rome, where a person that he knows, a family friend, I think, or perhaps a relation of his, I missed that bit of dialogue, I'm afraid, is running a restaurant in Rome, and he's had some problems with local gangsters. Chinese gangsters in Rome. There is a Chinese gang that's pressuring him to sell his restaurant to a local businessman, an Italian businessman, wants to take over his restaurant, and they are basically putting pressure on him by having hired thugs, members of this gang, hang out outside the restaurants and intimidate any potential customers. So no customers are coming in to eat, not paying for food, and thus the restaurant's losing money and they can't pay their workers and they threaten to go out of business, all because this Italian businessman wants to buy their restaurant, and they don't want to sell. So they call in Bruce Lee. Very smart move on their part, because Bruce Lee plays a character named Tang, who is a great martial arts fighter, and once he gets there and he starts showing his stuff, the bad guys who work for the Italian, they're clearly outmatched. When I was watching this, I was actually kind of reminded of your typical Steven Seagal movie from the 90s, in which Steven Seagal takes on minion after minion and just dispatches them very easily with a few quick moves. It really isn't much of a contest, and there's not much of a contest between Bruce Lee and all these, thugs who try and take him on one by one. Now, it's not to say that Bruce Lee is the only guy that does any fighting in the movie. There's actually a really good scene in which they confront the Italian businessman at his office, and there's a whole conflict between several characters all fighting each other that's pretty great. But for the most part, there isn't a lot of dramatic tension in this movie, and that's too bad, because there's not a lot of dramatic tension in the fights themselves, which is too bad, because the rest of the movie is not that great either, unfortunately. Like I said, Bruce Lee wrote and directed. Well, I don't think I mentioned that he wrote it, but he directed and starred in it, which is makes it very much his project, a very personal project for him. And the majority of the movie, this could be because of the English dub that I saw. It's just ridiculous. Most of it is just kind of ridiculous. The English dubbing is extremely bad, and I suppose that makes it sort of an authentic martial arts movie experience for me as an American, because we Americans have ended up watching lots and lots of poorly dubbed East Asian martial arts movies over the years. Rather than the subtitled version, it's sort of a joke among Americans that a really authentic martial arts experience at the movies involves poor English dubbing. But it just seems ridiculous that they're going to so much trouble for this one restaurant right here. The Italian businessman wants the restaurant. It seems sort of as a point of pride. He's waited around for this long and he doesn't want to give it up, even though Bruce Lee is laying waste to all of his employees, all of his hired goons. Excuse me, sorry, my throat's really dry. The restaurant owner doesn't want to sell, despite the fact that he's losing all kinds of business and his employees are being hurt by these thugs. And the Italian businessman doesn't want to give up buying, despite even when he starts losing the fight, he still wants to get that restaurant. For some reason, he just can't let it go. He just can't live without this restaurant. Of course, if one of them did, then the movie would be over. There'd be no more fighting, which is probably why the fighting keeps on going, despite the fact that the conflict gets as ridiculous as it does. Excuse me. There's also a last-minute sort of double-cross and betrayal that really didn't make a lot of sense to me. This is the first time I've seen this movie. I only watched it once, so maybe there are some nuances that I missed out on. But really, I just didn't think that the writing was all that great, and a lot of it seemed very, very silly, and it could be just the style of the film itself. But comparing this with The Chinese Boxer, which I watched a couple weeks ago for 1970, this movie isn't nearly as good. There's, again, a lot of the fights are very, very one-sided. Between Bruce Lee and all these guys he has to take on, he takes them out with very little effort at all. It seems like they're just easy peasy. And it isn't until the Italian businessman decides to contract outside help that things start to get a little bit more interesting. He flies in none other than Chuck Norris, to come on in and deal with this guy Tang, played by Bruce Lee, who's causing so much trouble for the Italian businessman. And Chuck Norris, yeah, I don't think he has a single line throughout the entire movie. He doesn't say a word. He's just there to fight, and he does that really well. And the climax basically comes down to a one-on-one between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris is basically hanging out in an empty Coliseum, and Bruce Lee spots him and walks around the Coliseum and eventually finds him, and then the two of them take a second to stretch and get ready, and then they engage in combat, which is a really good fight. Chuck Norris is strange looking without his facial hair. You know, Tom Selleck looks weird without his mustache. And Chuck Norris doesn't look quite as weird as Tom Selleck does without facial hair, but he looks a little bit strange. Also, he's got massive amounts of chest and shoulder hair. It's really odd. But yeah, it's a great fight. You know, certainly the highlight of the movie, the high point. Aside from that scene in the Italian businessman's office. Sorry if I'm not remembering character names. Like I said, I only just saw it the one time. But yeah, aside from that, the stakes are not real high. You know, there's really not a lot of doubt that Bruce Lee is going to prevail quite easily through most of the conflicts in this movie. And since the rest of the movie is just so silly, it really doesn't make for all that exciting viewing experience, not for me anyway. So I don't really recommend this one. Of course, if you're a fan of Bruce Lee, if you're a fan of just martial arts in general, and you want to see Bruce Lee kick a lot of ass, if you enjoy that vicarious thrill of seeing a guy take out a whole bunch of opponents with little efforts and prevail that way, then this is exactly the movie for you, but it really isn't for me, sorry to say. Like I said, this is the 1972 film, and 1973's pick is also a Bruce Lee movie, but that's Enter the Dragon, which is a movie that I saw a couple years ago, but haven't seen since then. I believe I saw it back in 2013. That was the year that I turned 40. That's when I did my 1973 series. So looking back at all those movies that came out the year I was born. But I'll be rewatching that and doing another video next week, a week from today. Thank you very much for watching. If you are new to my channel, in the link below you'll find not only the link to that article on The Way of the Dragon, but also my own Facebook page. If you'd like to comment there, that'd be great, or comment on this video. I'd appreciate that very much. Thank you for watching. Again, next week, Enter the Dragon, another Bruce Lee movie. Hope you'll tune in for that. See you again real soon. Bye.